I'm back.
We met Marge at the 2017 conference in Cincinnati, and she mentioned needing our help with winning that American Express grant. And they got second place, and they opened this park in April 2019. And I'll just let Marge get started.
Okay. I'm going to, okay, this is the first time I've done this, guys. So it's exciting, and yes, it's a little bit scary. So I'm going to, if I can find the bar, I wanted to remove myself from the upper right-hand corner. Whoops, that's not going to do it. Oh, there it is.
Oh, and everyone, if you have questions,
perfect. Okay.
Just type your questions in the chat.
Okay, so thank you, SCA, for giving me the opportunity to share the Casa Grande Neon Sign Park. So y'all remember Petula Clark, who said, "Downtown, linger where the neon lights are pretty." That is my favorite downtown song, and I wish we could be lingering in the park tonight, but right at this moment, it's 112 degrees, and the sun won't be setting for another 2 hours. Right. So let's get started inside. Okay, let's get started. For whatever the reason, my wonderful gadget that's been working all afternoon is not advancing my photo.
And we lost your picture too, I think.
That was intentional.
Oh.
That was intentional, but not being able to advance. Oh, there we go. Yoo-hoo! Okay, so the Sunset Court. That sign was from 1941, and it was the third sign that we saved. And I begged the owner of that property, who lived in Colorado for over a year, to let us have that sign. And finally he said, "Okay, you can have the sign. You'll just need to have a trailer and a crane." So I had a friend with the trailer, and I had a crane by the end of the week. And we took the sign on May 13th, 2013. And 13 kind of rings true to a whole lot of things that we did on the 13th that I'll be mentioning as we move forward. So the day that we were taking the sign down, there was a gentleman that was sitting out in the center turn lane of Highway 84. And when we got finished, I said to him, "Is there a chance that you're Mr. Osborne?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And he was grinning ear to ear. And he said, "I was born in that court. I was raised in that court. My parents ran that court. And thank you so much for saving that sign." And that's kind of, that was a real inspiration. So 4 years later, on June 13th, there's the Osborne family after we've loaded the sign on Jude Cook's truck with 3 generations, his granddaughter and his daughter, and off it went to Tucson for restoration. 4 months later, we had the lighting ceremony. And actually the Osbornes had an opportunity to work with us on telling us what colors they'd like that sunset to be as they best remembered. It's a one-sided sign, and it's a one-sided sign for several reasons. Number one, it was in extremely bad condition. Second, we had secured a building to put it on. Thirdly, we could afford it because we had had a fundraiser and we had enough money raised to have the sign restored. And number 4, we started calling it the domino that was going to start the excitement for a sign park. And then that mural was being done all at the same time. And so the lighting was in October. We waited till the mural was done. And it has Highway 84 on it. A lot of the property that, historic properties that were on the highway, and also the trading posts that were along that highway. So it's really a cool mural, and we're excited about it. So before we go into the signs and what I'm going to tell you about them that are in the park, I'd just like to mention that the property that the park is located on is where Central Elementary School was built in 1914, and it was demolished in 1974. And then the bank built a plaza there, and then the Casa Grande Valley newspapers bought the whole property, and they are the ones that granted us the use of the property for the neon sign park. On the property, we also have 100-year-old olive trees that were planted as seedlings in 1914 for a little girl that died of diphtheria. So our first sign, which was really the first sign that we saved in 2004 at the time that the motel was demolished, is the Horseshoe Motel. And for those of you that were voting for us in the contest, this was our the icon that we used for the contest, and it was quite appropriate. This particular sign was installed in 1953 on the property, and that vertical motel was added much later. Actually, we got rid of it. Jude had said it was probably added in a desperate attempt to attract attention of Highway 84 travelers at a time when the motel was just really badly worn. But the original owners operated the motel in the 40s, from 43 to 65 actually. And it's kind of fun to see the old ads because they advertise it as a clean, modern, air-cooled units, panel array, vented heat, and carports. And it's also known to be one of the first motels in Casa Grande to install air conditioning. So it was located on Highway 84, as the majority of our signs in the park were, and it was also known as the Old Tucson Highway. So newspaper articles in the late 40s indicated that winter guests who had stayed there for a month or so were heading home. The motel was purchased in auction at 1989 by the Williams family. And during the 7 years that they owned the motel, Linda told me that she was constantly reminded by patrons who stopped in, and they just told her, oh, they had such fond memories of the good times they had spent there, either on their honeymoon or a trip or other special occasions. And again, that's why this was a logical choice to pick this sign as our signature sign, the Partners in Preservation Grant. Those cute little awnings that are on the motel right before it was demolished, those were repurposed in two separate downtown public art projects. One in the alley with a big mural and all kinds of history of our original Main Street district, and in 2006, and then again in 2013 in the Doors to the Past project. So the vision and the dream of a sign park really started percolating in about 2015 when we invited Jude Cook to come to town. We had heard about all the great things that he was doing in Tucson with their neon restoration projects. And so we asked if he would come up and look at some of ours. So that color, question mark, what that's all about is the sign had laid out in the sun for over 10 years, and then we finally begged the city to move it inside. And all the neon was broken, but Jude was able to find all the numbers on that broken glass to determine the original colors of the neon. How exciting is that? So there's a photo. Actually, what was that? About from 15 to 18, 3 years later, we're now taking the sign off to Tucson to have it restored. And then guess what? A month or so after Jude had the sign, he tells me about this postcard that you're seeing. And it was one of the Horseshoe Motel that a Tucson customer had brought to him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Jude, I just saw one of those waivers at Terry's Turf when I was at the SCA conference in Cincinnati, and I got a photo of it. We need one of those for the park. And would you please do a reproduction? So his Tucson, of course he said yes. And his Tucson customer wanted neon on his, and he didn't care about the arm moving, but I said, of course, we want the arm to move on ours. So after trying a couple of ideas, he ended up using a car windshield wiper motor for that arm to move. And and everybody, I think, knows the story about the light in the waiver's hand. But when the motel had vacancies, it was on. And when the motel was full, it was off. But ours is on whenever the signs are lit. And that's every night of the year from dusk until 11 o'clock. And our guy is named Paul. And we just love him so. And there's the final look of the Horseshoe Motel after it got restored. And in the lower right-hand corner, you're seeing Buzz, our buzzard. And we'll talk more about him in a little bit. Next, we have our Goddard shoe sign. And that was the second sign that we saved in December of '06. And I was the director of Casa Grande Main Street at the time. And I had my eyes on this sign for quite a while because I had an art project in the alley that I was planning on using it. I had no idea what had originally been on it. So I contacted the owner, Irwin, and I told him I was going to have a crane downtown the following week. And could I have the sign off of his building? And guys, he said yes. And then it was like, oh, great, this is awesome. But now what do I do with it? So a friend of mine was a facilities manager at the History Museum, and he said, oh, I could take it over there. So there it laid for the next 10 years, mostly stored outside. Actually, it was over there for 12 years. It's our only enamel sign in the park, and it's the oldest sign in the park, 1945. And it was manufactured by Zeiser Brothers Inc. in St. Louis, Missouri. Now then, while we have the manufacturer information on many of our local sign landmarks, this is the only sign in the park that we really know for sure who manufactured it. So this will be another research opportunity. So the slide you're looking at now is Graham's Neon and Mesa. They restored 2 signs, and this is one of them, and the other was the photo shop. Cook and Company in Tucson did the other 12 signs, and they installed all the signs. And this photo we've always just kind of loved. Rena at Main Street, when she was there, we always loved this one because it was just like it was flying into place to get on its pole and get into position. And the other thing, some kids, as it was rumored years ago, had cut the neck off the goose. So that was one thing that Larry had to do. He had to remanufacture a gooseneck and a head so there would be something for the neon to run around. This sign is the 4th sign that we saved, and we saved this one when Harbor Freight came to town. The sign is from 1976, and we really wanted all of it, but they wanted to repurpose those 6 smaller vertical signs. So the museum agreed to store the tool sign for me outside of their barn area. And you can see they were really in rough shape. And they were over there for 4 years. So along comes Jude, and he had the vision to repurpose the frames of those signs in an existing monument sign that's out on the boulevard. And he used 4 of them. They fit right inside there with the other, the green Casa Grande and the little bar underneath that he manufactured. And there we are, right out there. It's at the north end of the park. It's not typically the way people come into the park, but it is out on the boulevard. And now we'll talk about Buzz for just a second. This is your first look at Buzz, and he is our downtown mascot. Why a buzzard, you ask? Well, most often people call them turkey vultures, and about 150 of them roost in our downtown park. So why not our downtown mascot? And as the story goes, many of the turkey vultures migrate to Mexico, whereas the southern population are less migratory, and they have chosen to stay in Casa Grande. And honestly, there was an article in the paper about a year ago that says 150 of them decide to stay in Casa Grande. So let's, one other thing that's kind of fun with that is someone hired Jude to do this little desk size version. And if I can pull it over at the end of this presentation, it was given to me as a gift. So let's stop for a moment and look what else was going on in Casa Grande in 2016 to save our sign history. The Casa Grande Historic Preservation Commission was awarded a certified local government pass-through grant to inventory all of our vintage signs to determine which ones would be eligible as local sign landmarks. And 81 of them were inventoried, and 32 were determined as eligible, and 5 more were conditionally eligible if they went back into their original location. But we happened to have those 5, and we put them in the park. So looking at that, we just picked 5 kind of different type of signs, and at the time, it was pretty raw because this is what happened to the silver bullet sign. I have to take a deep breath every time I think about it. It was even hard to put it in this presentation. But on April the 14th in 2016, while we were in the throes of inventory and everything, and trying to save the Dairy Queen sign, I'm going to say this is a very dark day in Casa Grande for sign preservation. Laura at the city, she got a call that there was a Facebook posting that the sign was being removed. She called me, we ran over, and this is what we saw when we arrived. And we thought we had this one protected. Like I say, it still pains me to think about it, but there is another story that goes along with it. People that took it in Iowa, they hired a delivery person. I call him Carlos the Bandit. Guess what he did? He pawned it. Then the pawn shop sold the pink slip, and then the new owner tried to sell it on Craigslist. And then I got a call from Fred's Bolts and Nuts, and I ran over, and sure enough, it was on Craigslist. So I called Chris, our contact in Iowa, told him all about it. He got the police involved because obviously he had filed a police report, and they eventually, the sheriff's department actually went out and got it. It finally got delivered by a reliable source. They restored it, and my friend was in Iowa a year or so ago, and she took this picture for me. So you can see it was a great loss, and it was their gain. Darn it anyways. So the good news, at the same time that was going on, we were trying to save the Dairy Queen sign because we had as you see on the brazier there, brazier board, thank you for 39 years, we're closing. The Steinhoffs, one of 3 owners of the Dairy Queen since 1950, actually the second owner, they went out of business in December, and we, as a commission, really started getting nervous about the sign. The sign was originally mounted on a pole, but it was moved to into the building as you see it today on that, and as it is today. In 2014, when the Steinhoffs participated in a private-public partnership with the city doing an extensive remodel. And that same year, they received a 2004 Arizona Main Street First Place Award for Best Public-Private Partnership, for which we were quite excited at Main Street. So we knew the sign was in danger after the DQ closed, and Dairy Queen corporate had been requesting old signs come down and be replaced with the new corporate look. We snagged the cones in January of 2017. Let me back up for a moment. That's when this story began. It went into receivership with the bank, incidentally, the same bank that sold the the Silver Bullet sign. Then a new owner came on a year later, and we were aggressively working to create a local sign landmark, which we did, and we had that designated April 18th, just a few days after the loss of our Silver Bullet. Then 3 months later, after the designation, DQ Corporate challenged the saving of that reader board because it was installed in the late 70s. But the HPC stood firm, and with the help of the new owner, the designation stayed in place as intended. So then we came along and we snagged the cones in January of 17 when the grill and chill changes were actually made. And you see those up at the top of the building when they went to the new DQ symbol and the grill and chill look. But the cones had to go, and they spent the next year and a half in my garage, and today they're in the swing park as our drive-through and our exit, although you can't drive through the park. And as a side note, I'm going to say that we've always been under the impression that west of the Mississippi, that we were the only other Dairy Queen sign with this style of a cone was located in Topeka, Kansas. But when SCA member Fred Zander from Topeka was in Casa Grande a few months ago, he told me that one had come down. So if there's anybody listening that knows anything else about these signs with the cones, I would love to hear from them. So, you know, the local, I'm going to just jump off for a minute to the value of having local sign landmarks. You know, it can be a lengthy process, and it can be a challenge to get the buy-in by the property owners. But at the moment, we have a total of 6. And the Dairy Queen, which I've talked about, the Cougar sign is city property now. It's in Carmacknac Park, and they just did an $8.2 million renovation of the park and had the money to restore it. The Dispatch is our amoeba sign, and that has had 2 previous owners. And again, the Dispatch is the one right next to the Neon Park where we have all of our signs. And then there's the Desert Sands. And that sign was installed in 1955. And another little SCA side note, the sign maker was discovered when I was reading a Doug Town magazine article in his Arizona Contractors and Community magazine. And so we have the sign owner on that one. And the current owner, Lee Blackburn, he's been in business at this location since 1982. And this is a guy that gets it. He loves that sign. And about a year ago, he had the Budweiser sign up above repaired. So the 21820 designation, that sign is actually for Sophia's Mexican Kitchen, but it's on the property of a historic building that was built in 1907. And we're hoping to restore that sign. And the final one, as you see, was just designated, and the Kiwanis International, or the local chapter, they funded the ballpark in that Carmacknac Park. So that one was low-hanging fruit, so we were able to get that one designated. Finally, our Dairy Queen Lips. It's the only sign in the park that is not from Casa Grande. And it was given to me as I just happened to be coming back from Colorado road trip, stopped in Holbrook to see how they fared after that corporate take all your signs down. I knew they had saved their neon sign, but look what was sitting at the back of the parking lot. Oh my gosh, it was like, I can't believe my eyes, and I wanted it to go with our cones. So I asked the owner, and doggone it, she gave it to me. And then it had been cracked when they took it down. And Jude was just a wizard. He was able to like sew the crack and fill it in, and you can hardly even tell. But before we decided to do that, we thought, oh, maybe, we'll just put aluminum back on it, paint it red, put it up against palm trees and call it good. But I thought, oh, there must be a boneyard somewhere for Dairy Queen signs. So I contacted the district manager in Southern Arizona for Southern Arizona, of which we fall in that district. And he said, oh, Marge, you're never going to find a replacement for that back. And I'm like, how so? And he said, because Mr. Toomey owned the Dairy Queen at the time. The Route 66 was bypassed by Interstate 40. And he was very influential in the community. And he went to the Dairy Queen sign maker and had them make an oversized sign. He said, I don't know how he ever got it approved. He said, I don't know how it never blew off that pole. But he did it so when people were going down the interstate, they would see that humongous big sign and they would pull off on the next exit and go get a Dairy Queen. Well, I'm not even sure that Mrs. Reyes knew that when she gave it to me. But we've got it, and honestly, people come into the park, and they're always wanting to know when we're going to put up the Dairy Queen. And actually, the Dairy Queen is about a block and a half away, our little downtown Dairy Queen. So that you can just see how magnificently large that darn sign is. And in the background, we've got that other Photoshop sign. The Coxson's Material sign is the next one. And this one's kind of fun because a gentleman that owns air conditioning business here in town got so excited at our Sunset Court lighting in October of 17 that by a month later, no, it was less than a month, he had already secured the sign off the building for us. That's what it looked like when I got to his lot. But, oops, I'm going to go back because, nope. That's what it looked like when it got to his lot. He just got so excited about what we were doing, then he knew the people were going to retire and be going out of business, and someone was getting ready to buy the building. It's on railroad property. And so he stored it until, and then he turned up delivering it to Tucson for us. That particular sign had been Coxsone since 1967. However, it had been O'Malley's Lumber from Phoenix prior to that. And normally we would always take a sign back to the original owner. But in this case, since they had it more in excess of 50 years, and because they were locally owned and operated, and wonderful members of the community, we took it back to Coxson's. And that is Mike down at Jude's place. He did a lot of the lettering on our signs. And that's kind of what it looked like when we took it off the building or when Cecil did. And so we're kind of wanted to show that we've got the quick fix in the upper left-hand corner. Oh, the neon's all broken and the sign's all faded. Let's just slap another sign on top of it. Or let's take the sign down right, send it to a professional, and this is what it looks like on the right. And the colors are different because it had been painted and repainted and repainted. And the owners participated in telling us what color they remembered it being 50 years ago. So light tan. So there we are, and they did remember the color of the neon. So next we have the 4 signs that came to us from the museum. The Arizona Edison from 1950, those were, that was the power company, and they were 2 one-sided signs. And they gave one at the time. APS, our current power company, bought the business in 1950. They gave one of the signs to the city, and they gave the other one to the museum. Well, we let's see, on that sign, it was well into the project that we were doing some research, and we found an article from when the city had it, and it had all the different colors of the neon that was on the sign when it came to them. And our sign had no neon on it. So we have been able to recreate that sign with the original look. They changed it to read Casa Grande, took off the Arizona Edison on theirs. And now we know that ours is authentic because it's the exact color of neon that was on the sign when it was Arizona Edison. The Valley Bank sign, that also is from 1950. It was a small sign that was over the night deposit box. And Jude said, oh, no problem. I can just put a box on the back of it, which he did. That's what you see on the right. And he's got LED lighting behind it. We have LED lighting only 2 places in the park, 3 places. On the cones, we have LED light bulbs on the Valley Bank and also on the Dairy Queen. So the Valley, a little side note on the Valley National Bank, they did have a very large one on the roof that no one has any idea what happened to it. But in 1983, during the energy crisis, they sent someone down, Valley Bank sent someone down from Phoenix corporate to check on how they could save power. And the one on the roof had 800 feet of neon. So they turned it off and it never was turned back on. Later, the bank, it became Bank One, and now it's Chase Bank. So that's the story on that one. So the Hotel Sakatome, that one came to us with the pole and the sign. And the sign, as you can see, was kind of rusted and kind of beaten up. At some point in time, when that sat over on Highway 84, and Highway 84 originally was on Main Street, and then it moved up to 2nd Street. At some point in time, ADOT decided it was in their right-of-way, and so they just sent it, pole and all, off to the museum, and that's where it had stayed until we were able to snag it for the park. And the right-hand side, of course, what it looks like. And when it got down to Tucson, Jude called me and he said, Marge, that Hotel Sakatome has a flasher in it. And I didn't bid a flasher. And I'm like, oh, it needs to flash again. So yes, folks, it flashes. The one at the bottom is the photo shop. That one was from 1950. The photo shop closed after being in business for 40 years. And at the time that it closed, Mickey Carlton, who was a member of the museum, called her son Marvin, who was a photographer by then, grew up in Casa Grande, but was now a photographer in Phoenix, and he had purchased his first camera at the photo shop. And this story is kind of a fun one because she called him and she said, they're closing the shop. Is there anything you want? He's like, I always kind of like the sign. So she got the sign, hired a crane, sent it to Phoenix. And it was in Phoenix for the next 26 years. First at his photography shop, and then after he moved his shop to the house, it was in his backyard. In 2016, the Carltons were planning a move to California. And they felt inspired to return the sign to Casa Grande. At least that's what we have on the plaque, because he wouldn't let me tell the real story. But I bet he's not listening tonight. So the real story is, he had a dream, and in the dream, his mother, Mickey, came to him and said, you need to send the sign back to Casa Grande. And they just felt that it was meant to be, so they did. And I happened to be at Casa Grande the day they were having their annual meeting when they brought it down, and we were all really quite excited. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have it in the park. And that Photoshop, the reason why the one on the right says Casa Grande is what I was told, that in the day, Photoshops would just kind of order those as blanks. And then when they would get to their community, they would have somebody put the name of their town on there. So that's the explanation for that. And the man that owned the photo shop, it was Mr. Garias, and he's a well-known photographer. And actually, as we speak, a book is being planned to reveal a whole lot, 144 of his famous Arizona photos. So that one is really exciting to have in the park. And then here's our last sign. Last but not least is our Ralph sign. And it was pole ready. We had the pole in the park when we had the opening, but we had no funds available to restore it. So we started a campaign of Leave No Sign Behind. And that campaign began in April, and it was completed in August. And it was like, we can do this, $100 at a time. And I just want to throw in, God love you, SCA people. I had a donation from an attendee that I met at the Dell's conference, SCA conference. I mean, unbelievable, and how wonderful. So the story on this one is the sign lower left. The sign had been painted white for years, and Ralph's Cafe had closed in the early 70s. There weren't any photos of what the sign looked like until Gene Lehman at the museum found one, which is the upper left, and it was in black and white. So Gene was a really good friend of Ralph Honeycutt, who was the owner of Ralph's, and it was a truck stop, with the first truck stop in Casa Grande to have a cafe. And the sign had gone up in 1956, and Gene was there when the sign was installed. Gene was there in March of 19 when we took the sign down, lower left. And Gene told his story at the lighting ceremony in October. So we still didn't know about the color. So I found out quite by another one of those coincidences, and many, many, many of those happened during this journey. I went to Marguerite Honeycutt, who has since passed, but was in her 90s at the time, to get some family history. And she really didn't have much, but she did say, you know, I don't give a darn about that sign, but I'll give you a check for $100. Yippee. So then a few months later, short months later, she called me one day and she's like, oh my gosh, I know what color the sign was. She said, I have a niece and she remembers it when she was 5 years old, and it was red and white. Well, you know, we figured the white must be the white and the black must be the red. So that was our best hint. And again, when Jude got into that one and started taking off, there was different colors on there, but we picked a color of red that we thought would do it great justice. And that's what you see on the lower right-hand side. So I'm going to go off now to the park itself. And the Casa Grande Valley newspapers got a drone a few months ago, and this was a daytime shot with their new drone. And I especially love this one, hoping to put it on a postcard because Ralph's sign is in it. And across the street, that tall building you see, that is our rock church. Michael Sullivan was a stonemason. We have several buildings in town with those stones on them. That was his grand project, and the last one he did before he passed. And it's just kind of a cool photo. And then I'm going to go through a series of nighttime so you can enjoy the park at dusk and at night. This was that one out on the boulevard at night and what it looks like. This is one that Jude created for us with kind of a neon sign look that's on the facade inside the park. This is our grande lighting ceremony on April the 13th of 2019. And actually, folks, we had to have that park finished by the end of June of 19 in order to get the second half of the money. And we made it. Another picture of the grande lighting. And then just a series of pictures. Oh, and Buzz just jumped in there. A series of pictures of the park at dusk And there you see everything on the facade over there, and the horseshoe in the center, that big Dairy Queen sign. Buzz jumped onto the Hotel Sackatoon. That's our little fake Buzz. That's going to be a game we're going to play later. Not us, but later in the park with the community. And then there is our lighting that we did in October. On the lower left-hand side is Nick, the gentleman that gave us the sign. And Brett is the grandson of Ralph Honeycutt. And our thank you to all of the people that participated in making that one happen. And then a few nighttime photos with the Ralph sign. And it is dandy. And you know, and I don't know if anybody noticed it when we were looking at the photo, but it had along where the light bulbs are on the arrow, it had at one point in time neon, but when we got the sign, there were holes in there. And so Jude and I talked about it, and it was like, you know, let's put light bulbs in there because we have no other light bulbs in the park. And actually we're able, the light bulbs go on and off. So it's just another dimension in the park that makes it exciting. Okay, so what's next?
Well, there's some comments.
Well, okay. We did win that preservation grant. And again, thanks to all of you that helped vote for that. We did come in second place in the country, and we did get $144,000. Yeah. And it was a great jump start, but it wasn't as nearly as much as what we needed, but that's okay. We got the park, and it's glorious. Then we have our novelty plate mountain under construction. And we also, and it was a fundraiser. We called that Make Your Mark in the Park. And we sold benches, pavers, story plaques, license plates. And now we're doing online monthly giving. And that's coming on kind of slowly. But we have other ideas of things that we want to put in the park, other enhancements, but we're going to need to have additional fundraising to do that. Then in our park, many of you, but not all, are old enough to remember the Burma Shave signs, but we have 6 of them because quite often they were in series along the side of the road in 5 or 6. And we have 6 signs, and each of our signs has a different slogan. And this one is our 6th sign. And of course, winning a national grant was no small feat. Way to go, HPC, the community, and Casa Grande Main Street. And I had help from a friend in the Art Association with some of the slogans. We are, as I said before, 10 of our signs in the park were on Highway 84 and 166. And we're trying to really communicate that Highway 84 to the community because most of it is disbanded by now, especially a lot of it went away when Interstate 10, when it came in years ago. But it did start in 1927. And I've got the history on that, but I won't, I won't belabor the point on that one. It was called the Old Tucson Highway. And another thing that happened this year, a friend of mine came up with the idea of a scavenger hunt, and she found somebody else to put it on Action Bound for her. And then we had the kids from Mission Heights Preparatory High School come over and do a beta test. And they just had so much fun with it. And now a person can go on to Action Bound, and that's also advertised on the website, the park website. Another thing that we have that is currently under construction, it's being updated, but it's all of our potential sign landmarks and all the signs in the park. And you can see most of them are concentrated in the downtown area. And that's where the group of them are. And that number 9 way at the top is that Jules Desert Sands. And then of course he's got the silver bullet on there that's in Ankeny, Iowa. That's being updated at the moment, but you'll be able to go on to the website and get this map and be able to see all the things you can see when you make your trip to Casa Grande. And then another thing that happened in January of this year, our Chamber of Commerce surprised us and put the neon sign park on the front cover of their directory. And then they came along in March. The mayor and the chamber have been working for 4 or 5 years on a whole marketing project that's just recently been funded. And they have decided to use neon for the Casa Grande. And so that one in the little one in the center is on a black t-shirt right now. The other thing is the COVID, with the COVID scene, they're using those decals and they're available for free that you can put on your business here in town. Okay, we're almost there, folks. I guess something else we're going to do and we're probably going to do that in the fall in the park is I found a gentleman that wants to donate something to the park, and he has designed some metal, they're really rebar saguaros, and then we're going to put Highway 84 signs on those. But you're probably some of the very first to know that. I just wanted, for those of you that kind of like to have facts and figures, I thought it might be of interest for you to know that 64% of our money, the $144,000, came from that grant, and that was National Trust for Preservation, American Express, National Geographic, and Main Street of America. The fundraising that I mentioned a moment ago with the pavers and the plates and all was 20%, and then 16% was in-kind services. All those people that were towing our signs to Tucson, which is a 140-mile round trip. We had one contractor went above and beyond, over $13,000. He dug all the holes in the park and poured all the concrete and set all the poles. It was just unbelievable. You know, folks, nobody said no when they were asked to do something, and that's just kind of what happens in this community. So that's the partnership and the photography, giving people credit for the little photos. And then we have won 3 awards. One last September, the Arizona chapter of the American Planning Association gave us the Arizona Great Place Award, City of Casa Grande Neon Sign Park. That's all on the award. And it's the first time that the Arizona chapter has ever given the Arizona Great Place Award. Usually it's just given by the American Planning Association. So we were excited about that. And someone outside of our community, actually someone in Mesa, nominated us. Then in June of this year, we were one of top 10 to win the Governor's Heritage Preservation Honor Award. And then in June, during the virtual Arizona Preservation Conference, they announced that we were first place on the top 10 for the Jim Garrison. And Jim Garrison was just, he was a shippo for years. And to us that knew him and knew all the work he did in our community with historic preservation and recommendations and suggestions, honestly, this was truly an honor. And then at the bottom, we've had a lot of attention, media attention here in the community, but outside of the community, we had Explore Arizona. And, you know, I'm going to read he did a big spread in the May issue of the Arizona Republic. And I sent him a thank you because it was just unbelievable. And I need to read what he sent back to me. He's in May of 20, because he had been down here in March. He said, I really did love visiting the park. Even though I knew I would, I was still surprised at how powerful it was. Such an intimate and personal experience. It was one of my favorite days of the year before the world changed. Does that not just tell it all? I mean, it just kind of brings tears of joy whenever I think of this comment, because it's just the best, and it's how the park was really visioned, you know, and it's what it was intended to do. The the three at the bottom, well, signs of the times we were in, and thank you, Todd, at his museum in Cincinnati, Tom Swornseth. And the last three magazines, thank you, Doug Town, SCA, because those were, he's editor in two of those magazines, I know, but the Phoenix magazine, he made it happen that they got a big article in the Phoenix magazine for us. So, with that said, I want to thank Fred Zander at SCA for taking the time to see our roadside attraction. The other thank yous that I previously gave, Jeremy Ebersol on the SCA board was here in the early part of March and visited the park, made his mark in the park with a donation, and also had us in that fabulous paper that he did on neon. So thank you, and thank you, SCA and Michael, for allowing me to do this presentation this evening.
Well, thank you. And there are some comments and questions. Joel asked, are there signs in Casa Grande that are still being used by businesses that are destined for the park because the owners have agreed to donate them?
No, not yet. And I have one where the owner would love to give it to me, but I'd really like to see it stay in place. But we have a bid to have it restored, and it's thousands of dollars, and he can only afford $2,000. And to be honest with you, we really don't have, we need to maintain the park now and do some other things to kind of promote the Highway 84 and all of that. Some of the little extras that we couldn't do when we opened the park. But when the Urban Land Institute came down a year ago, they suggested to the city, and I wish the city was listening, that we take some of those signs that are endangered and the city take them and put them along the boulevard. From City Hall is just a few blocks away from the park and down to the Holiday Inn. That area really delineates the downtown area. And they are suggesting that we do like they've done in Tucson, like they do up in Las Vegas, put those along. And so I am just hoping and praying that that will be something that might happen in the future.
And Stephanie asked if you have any advice on how they could replicate this in other states, like in Georgia.
Oh, Stephanie. You know, it almost seemed like this park was destined to happen because there are so many moving parts to putting something like this together. And every time we would enter a new arena, something just awesome would happen. Yes, I'm sure that if a person really had a plan, and we had a plan, but we were kind of flying by the end of the, flying by the seat of our pants, only because we never expected to have that grant opportunity just within months after we knew we wanted a park and that the owners of the property said, yes, you can use the property. I mean, it happened so quickly. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to, if she wants to contact me by email, if there's some other details maybe I could share, I'd be happy to.
Could you say a little bit about that, the donating of the property, about how that came about?
Well, I went to Main Street, Rena, the director at the time at Main Street, and I said, Rena, I have an idea, and it's a sign park. All those signs that we've been collecting all these years. And I told her where I thought it should be. And she loved the idea. And she said, I'll do it on one condition, that you go to the Kramers, and that's the family that owns the parcel. If you go to the Kramers and you get their permission. So what did I have to lose? I went to the Kramers, and you know something? They thought about it overnight, and they said yes. That's what I mean. It was just destined to happen. I mean, we could have never done that park if we would have had to gone out and buy property.
Yeah.
We just couldn't. And they wouldn't have been willing to sell that property because they're there for the long haul and they own the whole city block.
Well, Denny says, nice presentation. The park was already on his to-do list, but added some underlines tonight. Thanks, he says.
Well, Denny, I live 3 minutes away from the park. And I'm working with the Kramers right now to open up a little suite that we're going to call a Central School Center. And not very many people know about that either because we're just getting started on it. But we're going to, it's not a museum, but we're going to have things in there on the Central School, on the newspaper, and on the park. And, you know, be in there in costume and be available. And just contact me by email. And I would be happy to show you around when you come to Casa Grande.
Well, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Well, we're coming up on an hour here, so
Yeah.
any other?
So, I just like to, I don't know how to, yeah, are there any other questions? And click to exit my slide. Do you see all of that?
Yeah.
Oops. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay.